It's 1918. World War I is drawing to a close. In a government office in Washington, D.C., a brilliant woman sits at a desk surrounded by intercepted telegraph messages, encrypted radio communications, and coded dispatches. She is one of the few people in America who can read these messages. She understands the complex mathematical and linguistic patterns that enemies have used to hide their communications. She holds secrets that could change the outcome of the war. Her name is Elizebeth Smith, but most people have never heard of her. During World War I, and especially during World War II, thousands of women worked in secret government agencies decoding enemy communications. These women were mathematicians, linguists, and brilliant minds who understood patterns and codes that most people couldn't comprehend. They worked in classified facilities where their contributions were classified as well. Their work remained secret for decades after the war ended. One of the most brilliant of these codebreakers was Elizebeth Smith. Smith was a remarkable woman, self-taught in cryptography, fluent in multiple languages, and possessed of an almost supernatural ability to recognize patterns in seemingly random characters. She could look at an encrypted message and see patterns that others missed. She could deduce the structure of encryption systems. She could crack codes that enemy governments believed were unbreakable. Elizebeth Smith's work during World War I and World War II saved thousands of lives. Her code-breaking efforts directly contributed to military victories. Her intelligence work disrupted enemy operations and exposed Nazi agents operating within the United States. Her contributions to the war effort were extraordinary. Yet when the war ended, Elizebeth Smith was erased from history. Her work was classified and remained secret for decades. Textbooks about World War II mentioned the famous code-breaking operations at Bletchley Park in Britain, but they almost never mentioned the American codebreakers who were working simultaneously to decrypt Nazi communications. When American codebreakers were mentioned, they were typically referred to as mathematicians or specialists, without names or recognition. It took decades for the true story of Elizebeth Smith and the other female codebreakers to emerge. And even today, most people don't know their names or understand the crucial role they played in winning World War II. This is the story of Elizebeth Smith and the thousands of female codebreakers who worked in secret to intercept and decrypt enemy communications. It's a story about genius, dedication, and the extraordinary power of women's minds applied to the greatest crisis of the century. It's a story about how history can hide the contributions of those who do their work in secret, and how truth can finally emerge when classified documents are revealed. To understand the importance of code-breaking during World War II, we need to understand how critical intelligence was to military operations. In modern warfare, information is as valuable as firepower. Knowing where the enemy is, what they're planning, how many soldiers they have, what their strategies are, this information can determine the outcome of battles and wars. During World War II, both the Allied and Axis powers understood this principle clearly. The Germans, believing their encryption systems were unbreakable, communicated vital military information via encrypted radio messages and telegraph communications. Orders from Berlin to field commanders were encrypted. Strategic plans were transmitted in code. Reports from spies and intelligence operatives were encoded before being transmitted. If the Allies could intercept these messages and decrypt them, they would have an enormous advantage. They would know German plans before the Germans executed them. They could position forces to counteract German strategies. They could intercept German supply shipments and sabotage operations. But there was a problem. The Germans used extraordinarily sophisticated encryption systems. The most famous was the Enigma machine, a mechanical encryption device that used rotating disks to encode messages in such a way that decryption seemed impossible without knowing the exact machine settings being used. To decrypt Enigma messages, you needed to know which rotor settings the Germans were using on any given day. The Germans changed these settings daily, sometimes multiple times per day. To the Germans, the system seemed absolutely secure. They believed no one could possibly intercept and decrypt their messages. But the Allies didn't know this was impossible, so they tried anyway. In Britain, at a facility called Bletchley Park, a team of codebreakers worked around the clock attempting to decrypt German Enigma messages. The team included mathematicians, linguists, and brilliant minds who approached the problem from different angles. In the United States, the situation was somewhat different. American codebreakers were working on several fronts simultaneously. They were attempting to decrypt Japanese military codes. They were working on German diplomatic communications. They were investigating Nazi spy networks operating within the United States. It was in this context that Elizebeth Smith began her extraordinary career as a codebreaker. Elizebeth Smith was born in 1892 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She was a bright child with exceptional linguistic ability. She learned multiple languages as a young person. She was educated during a time when higher education for women was rare and difficult to obtain. She attended college and studied languages and literature. After college, Smith became a journalist and writer. She moved to New York to pursue her career in journalism. But in 1917, as America entered World War I, her life changed direction. Smith was asked to work for the United States military in a classified capacity. The military needed people who could analyze intercepted communications and attempt to identify patterns that might reveal the structure of encryption systems. Smith accepted the position and moved to Washington, D.C. to work for what became known as the Code and Cipher Bureau, later called the Signal Intelligence Service, which would eventually become the National Security Agency. This decision launched one of the most remarkable careers in American intelligence history. When Smith arrived at the Code and Cipher Bureau, she had no formal training in cryptography or code breaking. No such training programs existed. Cryptography was considered a specialized military discipline that was strictly on a need-to-know basis. Smith had to learn everything on her own. But she possessed something that was more valuable than formal training: an intuitive understanding of patterns and structures. She could analyze a message and recognize regularities. She could see how letters appeared in certain positions with certain frequencies. She could deduce the underlying structure of an encryption system by examining multiple encrypted messages. Smith quickly became one of the most successful codebreakers in the Code and Cipher Bureau. She began decrypting intercepted messages that had seemed impossible to read. She identified patterns in German diplomatic communications. She tracked the activities of German agents operating in the United States. During World War I, her work was crucial in identifying and intercepting German intelligence operations in America. She helped expose spy networks. She provided intelligence that allowed the U.S. government to identify foreign agents and neutralize threats to American security. When World War I ended in 1918, Smith continued her work in the Code and Cipher Bureau. But in the years between the wars, the agency was scaled back. Funding was reduced. Many codebreakers were dismissed. But Elizebeth Smith remained. When World War II began and the United States entered the war in 1941, the intelligence services were rapidly expanded again. New facilities were created. New codebreakers were recruited. And Elizebeth Smith became one of the senior codebreakers, training and supervising other women who had been recruited into the intelligence services. The primary challenge facing American and British codebreakers was the German Enigma machine. This mechanical encryption device was remarkably sophisticated for its time. It used rotors that rotated after each letter was encoded, making frequency analysis, the traditional method of breaking substitution ciphers, extremely difficult. The Enigma machine had settings that determined how the rotors would align. These settings were changed daily, often multiple times per day. Without knowing the correct settings, Decrypting an Enigma message seemed mathematically impossible. The British at Bletchley Park had partially solved this problem by constructing machines called bombs that could test multiple Enigma rotor settings rapidly. By running through thousands of possible settings, they could eventually find the correct one and decrypt the message. But the process was slow and required considerable resources. In the United States, codebreakers were working on similar problems independently. Elizebeth Smith and her colleagues were among the American codebreakers attempting to decrypt German communications. But Elizebeth Smith's work wasn't primarily focused on the Enigma machine itself. Instead, Smith focused on a different problem: the identification and tracking of German spy networks. Smith monitored intercepted German diplomatic communications. She analyzed the coded messages sent by German diplomatic posts and agents working in neutral countries. She looked for patterns that might reveal the structure of German espionage operations. One of her most important discoveries involved a network of German spies operating within the United States. These agents were transmitting intelligence back to Berlin about American military production, American troop movements, and American political decisions. The information they gathered was valuable to the German war effort. By analyzing intercepted encrypted messages, Smith was able to identify the German spies operating in the United States. She traced their communications back to Berlin. She documented their intelligence networks. She provided the information that allowed American law enforcement and military intelligence to apprehend the spies and break up their networks. This work, while less dramatic than breaking the famous Enigma machine, was arguably more important to American security. German spies operating within the United States posed a direct threat to the American war effort. Smith's ability to identify and track these spies through encrypted communications was crucial to neutralizing this threat. But Smith's work went beyond simply identifying spies. She was analyzing diplomatic communications between Germany and neutral countries. She was tracking the activities of German intelligence services. She was building a comprehensive picture of German espionage operations worldwide. The work required extraordinary skill. Smith had to understand not just the structure of encryption systems, but also the patterns of human communication. She had to recognize how different German intelligence officials communicated. She had to understand the organizational structure of German espionage agencies based on the patterns visible in their communications. Smith trained other female codebreakers to do this work as well. As the war progressed and demand for code-breaking services increased, more and more women were recruited into the intelligence services. Many of these women were brilliant mathematicians and linguists who had no opportunity to use their talents in the civilian workforce. The military offered them the chance to apply their skills to the war effort. These women codebreakers worked in classified facilities where their work remained secret. They couldn't tell their families what they did. They couldn't discuss their work with friends. They couldn't reveal the intelligence they discovered. Everything they did was classified as secret or top secret. They analyzed intercepted messages day and night. They worked shifts around the clock to process the enormous volume of communications that were being intercepted. They studied German communications to identify patterns and structures. They worked to understand how the Germans organized their communications and what information was being transmitted. The work was exhausting and stressful. They were working during wartime, when the stakes were literally life and death. Every message they failed to decrypt might contain crucial intelligence that could determine the outcome of a battle. Every pattern they failed to recognize might miss vital information about enemy plans. Yet these women worked with dedication and focus. They understood the importance of their work, even if the general public didn't know what they were doing. They were contributing to the war effort in a way that was invisible but absolutely crucial. As World War II progressed, the American intelligence services became increasingly effective at intercepting and analyzing enemy communications. The combination of technical innovations, mathematical talent, and linguistic skill created a formidable intelligence operation. Elizebeth Smith was at the center of this operation. By the 1940s, Smith had become one of the most respected and accomplished codebreakers in the entire American intelligence establishment. She had trained dozens of other codebreakers. She had supervised complex intelligence operations. She had made discoveries that directly contributed to American military success. One of the most important contributions of American codebreakers was the intelligence they provided about German military operations. By decrypting German communications, American intelligence learned about German military plans, German force movements, and German weapons development. This intelligence was shared with military commanders. It allowed American military planners to anticipate German actions and position American forces to counteract them. The intelligence contributed to American victories in multiple theaters of the war. For example, American codebreakers intercepted communications that revealed German military movements in North Africa. This intelligence allowed American forces to position themselves to intercept German supply convoys and disrupt German military operations. The result was a significant American military advantage in that theater. Similarly, American codebreakers intercepted communications that provided intelligence about German weapons development, including information about German work on advanced weapons systems. This intelligence helped American military planners understand the German threat and develop countermeasures. The work of the female codebreakers was particularly crucial in the area of counterintelligence. The intelligence about German spy networks provided by codebreakers like Elizebeth Smith allowed American law enforcement to apprehend German spies and disrupt German espionage operations within the United States. These operations prevented German agents from gathering intelligence about American military production and military deployments. The disruption of German spy networks reduced the quality and quantity of information available to German military planners, putting them at a disadvantage compared to the Americans who had access to high-quality intelligence. When World War II ended in 1945, the codebreakers' work became largely classified. The intelligence services recognized that many of the techniques and capabilities they had developed would remain valuable in future conflicts. They classified all the code-breaking operations as secret or top secret. The names of the codebreakers were not revealed. The specific work they had done was not disclosed. Elizebeth Smith was among those whose work was classified. She had contributed to the war effort in extraordinary ways. She had trained dozens of other codebreakers. She had made discoveries that saved thousands of lives. Yet her name and her contributions were kept secret. Smith continued to work for the intelligence services after the war. She worked on Soviet communications during the early Cold War. She continued to apply her code-breaking skills to new problems and new threats. But while Smith and her colleagues continued their classified work, the general public knew nothing about what they had accomplished during World War II. Textbooks about the war mentioned code-breaking in general terms, but rarely named specific code-breakers. When code-breakers were mentioned, they were typically referred to as anonymous mathematicians or specialists. The famous codebreakers who received public recognition were almost exclusively men. Alan Turing, the British mathematician who made theoretical contributions to codebreaking at Bletchley Park, became famous. But the thousands of women who actually performed the daily work of intercepting messages, analyzing patterns, and decrypting communications received no public recognition. This was partly because their work remained classified. It was partly because of gender bias in historical writing. Male codebreakers were more likely to be named and recognized. Female codebreakers were more likely to be referred to anonymously or simply not mentioned at all. It wasn't until the 1970s and 1980s that classified documents began to be released. Historians began to research the history of American codebreaking. They discovered that thousands of women had worked as codebreakers during the war. They learned the names of codebreakers who had been anonymous for decades. In 2017, more than 70 years after World War II ended, Elizebeth Smith passed away at the age of 124. She had lived a long and remarkable life, but most of her life story remained unknown to the public. Only in her final years did journalists and historians begin to tell her story and recognize her contributions to American intelligence and to the war effort. The discovery of the female codebreakers' contributions has changed how historians understand World War II intelligence operations. It has shown that the work of these women was absolutely crucial to American military success. It has demonstrated that gender has no bearing on intellectual capability or the ability to perform complex analytical work. The story of Elizebeth Smith and the female codebreakers is a story about the hidden nature of intelligence work and the erasure of women's contributions from historical memory. Intelligence work by its nature is secret. The people who work in intelligence agencies can't talk about their work. They can't reveal what they've accomplished. They can't share the secrets they've uncovered. This secrecy is necessary for national security. But it also means that intelligence workers rarely receive public recognition for their contributions. This invisibility is compounded by gender bias. Throughout history, women's contributions to important work have been minimized or erased, even when the work was not classified. In the case of the female codebreakers, the combination of classified work and gender bias resulted in almost complete historical erasure. But the story of the female codebreakers is important for understanding not just World War II intelligence operations, but also the nature of intellectual work and capability in general. The female codebreakers were among the most highly educated women in America. Many of them had degrees from elite universities. Many were fluent in multiple languages. Many possessed extraordinary mathematical abilities. They were the intellectual elite of their generation. Yet despite their exceptional qualifications and their crucial contributions to the war effort, they were paid less than male codebreakers. They were given fewer opportunities for advancement. After the war, they were more likely to be dismissed from intelligence agencies than male codebreakers. This discrimination was not based on capability. The women had proven their capability repeatedly through their successful code-breaking work. It was based purely on gender prejudice and outdated social attitudes about what work was appropriate for women. The story of the female codebreakers demonstrates that discrimination and erasure are choices made by societies and institutions, not inevitable facts. When the female codebreakers were recognized as crucial to the intelligence operations during World War II, it became clear that women were fully capable of performing complex intellectual work at the highest levels. Yet it took decades for this recognition to occur, and many women's contributions were never recognized before they passed away. The female codebreakers' legacy extends beyond World War II intelligence operations. Their story has influenced how intelligence agencies recruit and employ women. It has demonstrated the value of intellectual diversity in problem solving. It has shown that some of the most important work can be performed by people who are not publicly celebrated for their accomplishments. The story of Elizebeth Smith and the female codebreakers is also a story about the importance of historical accuracy and the danger of erasure. For decades, the history of World War II codebreaking was incomplete and inaccurate. It emphasized the work of male codebreakers and largely ignored the work of female codebreakers. This incomplete history gave people a distorted understanding of how intelligence operations actually worked and who contributed to them. Only when classified documents were released and historians were able to research the true history could the contribution of the female codebreakers be recognized. This demonstrates that we need to be vigilant about historical accuracy and that we need to make efforts to recover and preserve the stories of people whose contributions have been hidden or erased. Elizebeth Smith's life was extraordinary, and understanding her personal story helps us understand the broader significance of the female codebreakers' work. Smith was born in 1892 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She grew up in a family that valued education and intellectual achievement. Her parents encouraged her to study and to pursue her intellectual interests, which was unusual for girls during that era. Smith was a voracious reader and had an insatiable curiosity about languages and patterns. As a young person, Smith became interested in poetry and literature. She studied languages and became fluent in multiple languages, including Spanish, French, German, and Italian. She had an intuitive understanding of how languages worked, the patterns of letters, the structures of words, the ways that meaning was constructed through language. After college, Smith moved to New York to pursue a career as a journalist and writer. But she found the work unfulfilling. She was restless, seeking something that would challenge her intellectually and allow her to apply her talents in meaningful ways. When America entered World War I in 1917, Smith was approached about working for the military in a classified capacity. At the time, cryptography was largely an unknown field. There were no academic programs that taught code breaking. No one had formal training in how to break codes. Smith accepted the position and moved to Washington, D.C. She began working with the Code and Cipher Bureau, learning cryptography entirely on the job. She studied the theory of encryption. She analyzed intercepted messages. She began to develop an intuitive understanding of how codes worked and how they could be broken. Her linguistic background and her natural pattern recognition ability proved invaluable. She began to see structures in encrypted messages that others missed. She could analyze a message and recognize patterns that suggested the underlying encryption system. She could use these patterns to begin the process of breaking the code. Smith's personal life was unusual for women of her era. She was married to fellow codebreaker William Friedman. The Friedmans were among the first power couples in American intelligence, both of them brilliant codebreakers working together in the same field. They supported each other's careers and collaborated on code-breaking problems. But even their partnership and their exceptional accomplishments couldn't protect them from the discrimination and erasure that affected all female intelligence workers. After the war, when the intelligence services were scaled back, Elizabeth was more likely to be dismissed than her husband. She had to fight to maintain her position and her work. Throughout her life, Smith struggled with the tension between her deep commitment to her work and the limitations that society and institutions placed on her career. She wanted to apply her talents fully. She wanted to advance in her field. But she faced obstacles based purely on her gender. Yet Smith persevered. She built a remarkable career in intelligence work. She made contributions that were absolutely crucial to American military success during World War II. She trained and mentored other female codebreakers. She demonstrated through her accomplishments that women were fully capable of performing the highest levels of intellectual work. Other female codebreakers had similar stories. They were brilliant women who had found a way to apply their talents in meaningful work. Many of them came from families that valued education. Many had degrees from elite universities. Many were fluent in multiple languages. These women worked long hours in classified facilities. They analyzed intercepted messages. They worked on complex mathematical problems. They solved code-breaking challenges that seemed impossible. They contributed to military intelligence that directly affected the outcome of the war. Yet when the war ended, many of these women were dismissed. They were told that their services were no longer needed. They returned to civilian life where opportunities for women were limited. Many of them never worked in their fields again. They had to find other work, often work that didn't utilize their talents and skills. The personal stories of these women reveal the human cost of discrimination and erasure. These were brilliant women who had made extraordinary contributions to their country. Yet they were dismissed and forgotten. Their contributions were erased from history. For decades, most people didn't know their names or understand the importance of their work. The recovery of these women's stories demonstrates the importance of historical research and the necessity of preserving the memories of those who have made important contributions to our past. The story of Elizebeth Smith and the female codebreakers is fundamentally a story about invisible work and invisible people. Intelligence work is inherently invisible. Intelligence agencies work in secret. Their methods are secret. Their successes are often secret. The people who work in intelligence receive little public recognition for their accomplishments, even when those accomplishments are crucial to national security. This invisibility has consequences. It means that intelligence workers rarely receive proper historical recognition. It means that the public doesn't understand what intelligence agencies do or how important their work is. It means that intelligence work is often written out of official histories or mentioned only in vague terms. The female codebreakers were doubly invisible. Not only was their work classified and secret, but they were also women in a male-dominated field. Their contributions were more likely to be overlooked or attributed to men. Their work was more likely to be mentioned anonymously or not mentioned at all. Yet despite this invisibility, the female codebreakers made extraordinary contributions to World War II. Their work saved lives. Their intelligence helped win battles. Their contributions were absolutely crucial to American military success. This raises an important question. If we don't know the names of the people who made crucial contributions to our victory in World War II, what other important contributions have been erased from history? How many people have done important work that has been hidden or forgotten? How many women have made extraordinary contributions that have been attributed to men or simply not recognized? The story of Elizebeth Smith and the female codebreakers suggests that we need to be more vigilant about historical accuracy and about recognizing the contributions of people who work in invisible capacities. We need to make efforts to preserve classified documents so that future historians can recover the true history of intelligence operations. We need to listen to the stories of people who worked in secret during important historical periods. We need to be aware of gender bias in historical writing and work actively to correct historical narratives that have minimized or erased women's contributions. The recovery of the female codebreaker story has changed our understanding of World War II. It has shown that intelligence work was more sophisticated and more broadly staffed than was previously understood. It has demonstrated that women were essential to American intelligence operations. It has revealed contributions that were previously unknown. Elizebeth Smith lived to be 124 years old. She saw most of her life work remain classified and unknown. But in her final years, her story began to be recognized and celebrated. She received official recognition for her contributions. She was able to tell her story before she passed away. But how many other codebreakers, intelligence workers, and people who did important work in secret never received this recognition? How many women contributed to crucial work but never had their stories recovered because they passed away before historical documents were declassified? The story of Elizebeth Smith and the female codebreakers reminds us that history is not fixed. It can be recovered and revised as new information becomes available. It can be corrected when previous narratives are revealed to be incomplete or inaccurate. The female codebreakers proved that women were capable of performing the most complex and demanding intellectual work. They proved that gender has no bearing on intellectual capability. They proved that women could make extraordinary contributions to national security and to military victory. These women broke codes that enemies believed were unbreakable. They intercepted enemy communications that provided crucial intelligence. They trained other codebreakers and supervised complex intelligence operations. They did work of extraordinary importance, work that remained invisible and uncelebrated for decades. Their story is a reminder that some of the most important work is done by people who don't receive public recognition. Their story is a reminder that history can hide and erase contributions through classification and gender bias. Their story is a reminder that we need to work actively to recover and preserve the stories of those whose contributions have been hidden. Elizebeth Smith and the thousands of female codebreakers changed the course of World War II through their work. They proved that women belonged in positions requiring the highest intellectual and analytical skills. They showed that when given the opportunity, women could contribute extraordinary work to the most important challenges facing society. Their legacy is not just in the intelligence they provided during World War II. Their legacy is in showing that gender does not determine capability. Their legacy is in demonstrating the importance of recognizing and celebrating the contributions of those who work in invisible capacities. The codebreaker who saved thousands but never got credit has finally received her recognition. And her story stands as a testament to the power of human intelligence, the importance of historical accuracy, and the necessity of recovering and honoring the contributions of all those who have served their country, whether publicly celebrated or working in secret.